Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views on Thursday, April 27th, 2023. We've done it again, folks. We have dodged the weather bullet. This is getting to be really, really old, and it seems like every week we have a cycle of bad weather, and it hits right on the days that we're going to be trying to do our vid chats. So we are going to have the vid chat tomorrow. There has been a lull in the weather cycle, a brief period between now and tomorrow night when supposedly it's not going to be raining or storming. So I'm going to go ahead with the vid chat for tomorrow. However, I'm moving the vid chat up to 1 o'clock. We're going to start early so that we can make sure and get done before any storms pop up. As you know, I live in a region of the country where when storms pop up, they can pop up very suddenly and they can become severe really fast. So, Lord willing, we'll get through the questions and comments tomorrow. Please remember to get your questions and comments submitted no later than 10 o'clock U.S. Central Time tonight. Please remember to keep your questions and comments relatively short and limit yourself to one submission per person. All right, now there's a very, very interesting story. It's a very short story, and I'll be able to read the entire article to you. But the story has me extremely interested and thinking along the lines that I have been proposing for many years. And indeed, proposing ever since the United States started to meddle in the Ukraine with the overthrow of the elected Ukrainian President Yanukovych and the color revolution, the Maidan revolution, the installation of the puppet government that is currently in charge of the Ukraine, and on we could go. I've been warning that if the United States continued to play these types of games, if the global world elite, the oligarchs, the globalonists, the global loonists, whatever you wish to call them, if they continued to play the game and do these types of things, eventually they were going to be on the receiving end of similar games from Russia, China, and other countries. So I want to read this article. It is a story that ran just 2 days ago on TASS. That's the Russian state-owned wire news service. It's a very short article, only 4 paragraphs long. But it contains a message, and I think it is a message. And if I were Mr. Global Looney, I'd be thinking very, very carefully at this stage about what their plans are. So here we go. The dateline, of course, is Moscow, April 25th. And I'm going to read the entire article. Quote, Russia could take certain asymmetric steps if the United States and NATO pursue escalation in the deployment of nuclear weapons in Europe, Vladimir Yermakov, director of the Russian Foreign Ministry's Non-Proliferation and Arms Control Department, said in an interview with TASS. If the United States, and here we're quoting him, if the United States and NATO decide to escalate things further, we will assess the new risks to identify an appropriate response, including an asymmetric one, unquote, the diplomat said, when asked whether the West could deploy its nukes close to Belarus's borders in the wake of Russia's decision to station part of its nuclear arsenal on Belarusian soil. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that at Minsk's request, Russia would station its tactical nuclear weapons in the neighboring country, precisely the way the United States has long kept its own nuclear warheads on the territories of its allies. According to Putin, Moscow has already transferred the nuclear-capable Iskander system to Minsk and is helping its Belarusian counterparts refurbish their aircraft. Earlier this month, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov rebuked the West for its hysteria over Russia's plans to install storage facilities for such weapons in Belarus, while preferring to forget about the presence of U.S. nukes in Europe, unquote. And that's the story. Now, you'll notice that the emphasis in the story is asymmetrical response. And the way I'm reading this, folks, is the rest of the context surrounding that remark is about basing Russian sophisticated weapons systems in the countries of its neighbors, particularly Belarusia, but one can only assume along the borders of Russian territory with other states, particularly NATO states. Now, this might or might not include Moldova, the western Ukraine, or what have you, but my point here is that the asymmetrical response part of this is, in other words, being stated or said in a context where the rest of the context is about the stationing and positioning of weapons assets. Now, what this means to me, folks, is that Russia is sending a very clear message to the West and to Mr. Globaloney. Russia has also made it clear in statement after statement that it regards the West as provoking the Ukrainian war, and more recently as insisting that the Ukraine stay in the war, scuttling any peace talks. We've already seen that happen. And that the Ukraine fight to the last drop of Ukrainian blood for the purposes of Mr. Globaloney's globalist agenda. Now, I've mentioned before many other times that there are other agendas at work in the Ukraine, GMOs, trafficking, money laundering, you name it. But this is a warning. And I think the warning is basically that Russia has just served official notice that it is willing now to step up any escalations on the part of the West by asymmetrical responses, meaning, in my opinion, covert operations against the leadership of the West itself, or covert operations against crucial infrastructure in the West. This little article is, in my opinion, a bombshell, because it's the official notice, the semi-official notice to the West that, okay, if you want to keep playing these games, we're ready and prepared to start playing similar games. Folks, this might include things like I've written about and blogged about before, attacks on electrical substations and so on and so forth. But my guess is that many of these operations will be destabilizing operations to the leadership and political class of the West. This could get, in other words, very interesting and very bloody very fast. It's basically a notice saying you're not safe in your bunkers or your favorite vacation spots or any of this anymore. I think this is what's going on. And the reason I think that Russia is saying this is, if you've been paying attention to the news, the Ukraine has already carried out and conducted such operations on Russian soil and against Russians. Now, I'm not here to say that the Russians are innocent or anything of the sort. I'm simply pointing out that covert operations appear to have been initiated on Russian soil by the Ukraine, and let's face it, folks, if that's the case, then the Ukraine is acting as a proxy or a shill for the Western intelligence services, for Mr. Globaloney, and trying to start another color revolution inside of Russia and take Mr. Putin out of power. This is the game now. So I think the Russians have just served notice. This will be a story to watch carefully over the next couple of years. Hopefully it won't go on that long, but it will be interesting to see what sorts of escalations the Russians come up with. The Russians, I think, are doing this because they are still in the mentality that they have to avoid direct nuclear escalation at all costs. They are considering every alternative and keeping that one as the escalation of last resort, unlike the crazy people in the West. So this is definitely a story to watch, particularly for those of you out there with some intelligence or covert operations background. This might be something for you, especially with your expertise, to pay careful attention to. Don't forget, we are starting the vid chat early tomorrow at 1 o'clock U.S. Central Time. I'll be in the room early for pre-chat. Please get your questions, comments submitted no later than 10 o'clock this evening. And hopefully we will dodge the storms again. And I do have a couple of things I want to talk to members about during the vid chat tomorrow. So anyway, we will see you on the flip side. Bye-bye, everybody, and God bless.